Hi, welcome to this Open Security Summit session in January 2024. And we have Rui here who's going to talk us about his views on this alert readiness framework. So over to you.
Great, Dinesh. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be able to share this content. I will start by a brief presentation of myself. I'm currently the managing partner at Devoteam Cyber Trust. In fact, I joined this role when the company that I co-founded in 2009 was acquired by Devoteam. I also have an invited professor role at Catholic University of Lisbon. I've been in the field for over 25 years. I hold a master's in information security, some relevant certifications. And at my role at Devoteam is basically I manage the cyber trust practice along with responsibility for innovative services development. And I manage and I contribute in some of our most critical projects. Devoteam Cyber Trust has a comprehensive presence in over 18 countries with over 850 cybersecurity consultants, where we work in topics such as cyber resilience, applied security, and managed services. This said, I would like to start my presentation by mentioning that nowadays I believe that we are in a context where we have a full glass cybersecurity. And I say that because every time I speak with a CISO, I feel that their glass is really full and that they are spilling the remaining content on the floor. And this happens because the responsibilities of a CISO nowadays are so immense. They need to be focused on the threat landscape, on the risk management, on the incident responses, operations, awareness, compliance and regulations, governance and policies, third-party risk management, auditing, incident reporting, while they are supporting the business to operate on a more effective way, efficient way, and on a secure way, of course. Also, they still need to concern about budget, security architectures, new projects, initiatives, vendor and supplier management, identity and access management, security awareness, security behavior, knowing that nowadays over 80% of incidents have a human factor, business continuity, metrics, stay on top of emerging technologies and trends, and they need to engage with the board and executives at the organization. So this is so much stuff they need to take care of that their glass is pretty full. And this is not it. There are much more, of course. That's not a complete list. And all this while in a momentum where we know that attackers are every day more sophisticated and more organized. And the data, the quantitative data that we've got access to demonstrate this. In fact, complaints and losses doubled in 2 years. And effectively, it shows that 85% of the breaches involve a human element. So it's really challenging. And we also know that based on information that is public, that attackers are every day more organized. For example, there was a group called Conti Group, and when the Ukraine-Russia conflict started, this group was somehow dismantled and some information was leaked out, and it showed that this ransomware group, they even had, imagine, an HR department, performance reviews, and the employee of the month. So it really shows that attackers are getting more and more organized every day. And in fact, there is an interesting footage on YouTube if you search for the title. And this is a guy from BBC that they could take over the cameras of a data center where basically they were scamming people. And while looking at the footage, we can understand that these people, they are recruited as normal employees. And basically, they've got processes, they've got support, they are very well organized. So this means that nowadays, effectively, we need to have super CISOs. And maybe this is something that DC or Malva could think about. And I'm not surprised to see that there are data, facts that show that there is stress, burnout, and security fatigue in cybersecurity and in the CISO themselves. So these are facts, and this is the momentum where we are living nowadays. And in fact, there are several frameworks that can help. Of course, we've got NIST, ISO 27001, and many other frameworks that can help, but they are not being effective, are they? Because if they were being effective, then we wouldn't see the increase in the quantitative data that we just saw and that we just debated about. So I believe that these frameworks are really helpful, of course, but the majority of them are control centric, and I believe that something else could be added on top. In fact, nowadays there are several cyber resilience challenges because we know that cyber threats are growing in severity and frequency. Cybersecurity demands every day more spending on controls while business wants to cut budget. It's very hard to measure the risk appetite of each organization. There is also not a clean clarity in the lines of defense. And effectively, we know that attackers right now, they're even using AI, machine learning, and they're every day more organized and sophisticated. While we suffer a gap in resources, knowledge, and talent, and also regulation is also putting more pressure on the good sense to make sure that we are organized. So this year we've got NIS2, we've got DORA, all that going on. So it's a really dynamic and very very demanding environment, and it's very active as well. So to summarize how I see a typical approach nowadays in terms of cybersecurity, what I see is that organizations have got their cybersecurity management and their framework of management. They've got their day-to-day operations, and then they have a status in which everything is good, all good, no more operations, no more cybersecurity management. Or if they've got an incident, then they'll activate their incident response, and hopefully not, but maybe they'll go to business continuity. So this is the typical approach in a simplified way, of course, and this is applicable to 4 layers: processes, technology, people, and of course, we need to take into consideration business, because cybersecurity exists at most to support the core of any organization. Now, if we reflect on this, I could say that processes and technology is quite green. The last decades assured that organizations were much more mature. Maybe 10, 12 years ago, it would be still common to interview someone and they saying that they didn't have a framework of management, that they didn't have their processes, their policies in place. But nowadays, that's not that common anymore. So the processes is quite a greenfield. Technology, I remember 15, 20 years ago, organizations didn't even have a structured patch management system. Nowadays, of course, that's also covered. Of course, there are always issues and we need to stay on top, but this is also pretty much a greenfield. Now, we know that there are several initiatives towards people, awareness, gamification, etc., but it's not being enough because, as I usually say, people don't have a license to drive IT, so they are not experts in cybersecurity, and it's really hard to make sure that they work as an extension of cybersecurity teams, that they are engaged effectively every day, that they are engaged and fully engaged in cybersecurity. And business is really struggling because I still don't see cybersecurity to being able to extend its practice up to the layer of business, because we stay in the majority of situations, we stay at technical controls, at process level controls towards security, but it's really rare that I see organizations extending their controls towards business. So I believe that there are 2 problems that we need to address. The first one is there is a huge gap between all goods and there is a critical incident. I believe that the behavior of organizations could be fine-tuned according to the intermediate levels between all good and a critical incident. So that's the first issue. And the second issue is what I already referred, is I believe that the red ones and the yellow ones should be effectively addressed on an effective way. So even McKinsey states that CISOs need to build a culture of cyber resilience throughout their organization. This means everyone from the CEO to the frontline employees understands their role in protecting the organization from cyber threats. And I'm sure, because I've spoken with several people, and everyone agrees with this. People say, well, this is true. I agree with this. This makes loads of sense. But usually the question that I get after this statement is, okay, but how effectively do I implement this? Because it's an effective statement, but it's not actionable, right? So how do I put this into practice? Well, I believe that's the problem that we face nowadays is that cybersecurity grows, but it's still seen as a vertical risk rather than a horizontal risk. A huge gap exists between the CISO world and the remaining business and resources. Management gets involved whenever business is impacted or whenever an incident happens, but on a daily basis, the practice is not that regular. And most of the preventive, detective, and reactive controls are technical and are not business related. So this said, I believe that it's time that we step up. I believe that is a time where we should also evolve our strategies to stay ahead. Because if attackers are more sophisticated, if attackers are every day more organized, we cannot continue to run our cybersecurity using the same weapons that we had 1 decade ago or 2 decades ago. We really need to restructure the way that we organize ourselves in terms of management, in terms of governance, so that we can effectively stay ahead of this game. So, inspired on what the military has been doing for decades, and I think that this is a really common approach for everyone. Everyone knows what DEFCON is. Basically, they have 5 levels, and they will fine-tune their controls according to their current state, and the current state is influenced by the current perception of threats. So, inspired by this approach, I had the idea to create a framework about why not cybersecurity operates at the state of alert levels in a similar way that DEFCON does it for the military. So the idea was to create, implement, and help organizations to operate a framework that is oriented to the states of the alert level of each organization. And of course, that each level of alert should be interrelated with the processes, procedures, and activities in the dimensions of people, processes, business, and technology. So essentially, the mindset is taking into consideration several sources of information that are placed in organization, and this could be their intel, their actual threat level, SOC data, business context, incidents, known weaknesses, whatever. Organizations could effectively calculate, determine what is their current alert level, and then basically they could prioritize the resolution according to the alert levels. So each one of these alert levels could have controls that would be applicable to the 3 main dimensions. And these controls, basically, what we defined is that these controls could be of 2 types. We could have what we name RTP controls and RTI controls. RTP controls are controls that will reduce the probability that the incident happens. And RTI controls are controls that reduce the impact in case the incident happens. So think about this. It's like you have your car and you are driving. If you have if you have a major incident and you need to go to the hospital, that's the incident response. But between all goods and you need to go to the hospital, something can be done. So the RTP controls are like the ABS system in your car, helping you to brake better, to keep the control of your car, to avoid that you hit. So these are the types of RTP controls. And RTI controls are, imagine the airbag on your car, that what will do is will reduce the impact in case you hit. And what we want to do is to avoid that you go to the hospital. So we want to avoid that we go into incident response or that we have a critical major incident. So that's the mindset. Of course, that each one of these groups of controls are contextualized according to a scope within an organization, and there should be a different set of controls per alert level. So it means that as your alert level goes up or down, you need to fine tune your controls accordingly to the current alert level that your organization is facing right now. So based on this idea and between an idea and concretely helping organizations to make them effective, there is a huge amount of work, as you can imagine. So what we did was we documented this framework, and this framework is available. This is a contribution from DevOps Team Cyber Trust to the cybersecurity arena. Anyone can effectively download it, and it's the step-by-step guide of how an organization could implement this mindset into their organization. So the Alert Readiness Framework is organized by chapters. The first chapter is an introduction to the Alert Readiness Framework, stating an executive summary, its principles, the objectives, talking a bit about the importance of the sponsorship, the implementation methodology. Then we will go into the setup of the framework within a business organization. So organization needs to identify what are the goals and objectives, what is the implementation scope, identify the information sources. They need to elaborate a plan, of course, assign roles and responsibilities. And then we can go into the methodology by which we will be able to calculate the alert level of any organization at any time, and then define the contextual response plans. And also we've got a large chapter on how a GRC tool could be leveraged to implement alert readiness framework within an organization. So this was a work that had several contributors within DevOps Team Cyber Trust in several countries as well. It was something that took us around 9 months to document, and effectively it's ready. And as a summary, if any organization wants effectively to adopt alert readiness framework, the first important thing is to understand the context of the organization and then define the scope. Then we need to understand what kind of inputs and information sources are available. Of course, that risk assessment is at the heart of alert readiness framework, because we cannot define controls if we don't take into consideration the equation of cost benefit, and cost benefit at the end of the day is a result from risk assessment. And then we need to implement, monitor and review and update it over time. And of course, communication is key, because if we cannot communicate this organization-wide, the users will not be able to adopt this. So when an organization has this in place, when it's implemented, every user, every employee that has access to resources on an organization, they should know what is the current alert level and what is expected from each one of them. So this is why I believe that is a really clever way to put everyone in the same boat every day of the year. Now let's delve a bit deeper into alert level calculation and contextual response plan. So I will start basically by showing you a bit of the framework. I believe that you probably are seeing the framework right now. Yes, you are. Okay, great. So one of the chapters helps you to identify the sources of information. And the sources of information can be network traffic, system logs, threat intel, SOC, business operations data, human intelligence, external events, regulation, whatever. So what we need to do uh, is to define which sources of information will at any point contribute for us to evaluate what is our current alert level. Also, the framework suggests that every source has got a source owner and that every source is weight. Why? Because every source might have a different relevance for the calculation of the current alert level. So this is something that needs to be done. And we also need to identify who are the source owners because they will be responsible for the inputs that every source will provide for the calculation of the alert level. And then, of course, we need to define what is our current predefined scoring system. And afterwards, we need to effectively to consider what are the input factors. And you should take into consideration what is the potential impact, the likelihood, the urgency, and the relevance. And then every source will have their unique alert level. So imagine you might have different sources, and every source will have their actual current alert level. And then what we do is basically we take into account every alert, where every source, and based on it, we will proceed to calculate what is our current alert level, considering the weights of each one of them. But I would like to explain that the method to calculate your current alert level is at the same time quantitative and qualitative. This is the quantitative method, but the framework also considers that if a unique source transmits a maximum score for its source, then we need to trigger an urgent meeting of the management committee. So it means that if you are the owner of a source, let's say a SOC, and at a certain moment you say that your alert level is 4, it will get into the calculation of the alert level, and maybe the result is that the overall alert level is 2. That's fine. But if at any moment you say that my alert level is maximum, then you will trigger a meeting of the alert level management committee, and they might supersede the quantitative calculation, and they might upgrade the current alert level. So this is one of the mechanisms that is considered. So then effectively you can calculate your current alert level on the quantitative way or on the qualitative way. Also, we suggest that the alert level committee is composed of different people. You can have the CISO, risk officer, but you should also be on board to the business owner, legal, HR, because this should be a comprehensive towards the organization. The second topic in which I would like to delve deeper is the contextual response plan. And basically, I would like to show that what we can do is effectively we can define controls for each one of these 4 groups in order to fine-tune your current control levels according to your current alert level. So we might have, and the framework provides some examples of RTI and RTP controls for user behavior. So for example, it can mandate an immediate security awareness. It can ask users to change passwords. It can reinforce secure remote work policies, for example, or you might revoke accesses. You might increase IT support availability. So these are measures that if they are enabled 24/7, 365 days per year, the cost benefit might not be there for you. But the cost benefit is there for you if your alert level is higher. So this is why I believe that we should fine tune this, right? For example, you might have a lock for your house. Uh, and basically, if you are aware that the alert level at your area where you live, if the alert level is higher, then you might implement additional controls and you might need to carry more keys on a daily basis and you might need to lose more time opening and closing doors. But if the alert level is low, then you don't need that trade-off on a daily basis. So that's the mindset behind tweaking this kind of controls. So the framework also suggests technical controls. So you might, for example, if your alert level goes up, you might increase the scanning frequency. You might fine tune your IPS IDS systems. You might force multiple factor authentication to additional layers. You might increase logging verbosity, for example. You might want to isolate systems. And of course, these are temporary measures until the alert level is elevated. There are also examples of administrative controls. You might activate different remote work policies. You might want to have stronger password rules. You might want to have additional measures for security remote access. You might deactivate some third parties that are not critical, that they cannot access remotely through your VPN. And of course, there are also business controls. That's the reason for which I believe that this framework is key to extend cybersecurity towards business. You might consider shutting down non-essential services. Um, you might, for example, limit the non-essential third-party access to business systems. You might even fine-tune the number of queries that you permit per user. You might lower the number of transactions. You might even lower the amounts of purchases or transactions or transfers or whatever. So of course that these are just examples, and every organization, according to its context and to its core business, will have different controls. The framework helps you effectively and helps you to think about it and helps you to inspire to implement the right controls for your organization. This said, in my opinion, the ideal approach would be effectively to have intermediate states in between all good and we have a critical incident. And these intermediate states would represent controls grouped by reduce the probability and reduce the impact controls applicable to the layers of business, people, processes, and technology. So I believe that there are many benefits of adopting this mindset. One of them is being able to do a gamification of cybersecurity. And I know that cybersecurity is not a game, but if we want to onboard thousands of users on an effective way, if we gamify it somehow using very well-known practices, such as the DEF CON practice, then the results will be much better. It's also proactive strategy, as I explained, is beyond the control-centric approach. It's able to extend the cybersecurity practice to the business. It's simple and effective. It's really simple to explain. That's why I will even finish earlier. It's a proven strategy from other industries, such as the military. It's a clever way to unify the communication. And in fact, one thing that makes also reflect is sometimes CISOs tell me that it's really annoying when someone from the board asks them, are we secure? And we know that we are never 100% secure. If someone wants 100% security, you know what to do, right? Just switch off your systems. So this said, it's a much easier way to communicate that if someone asks, are we secure? I would say we are in alert level 2. And the person should know exactly what we mean about it. And of course, that this framework implementing this mindset also has a leverage for an enhanced reputation for the organization itself. So we are helping our clients to do the program management, we've got the knowledge of the framework. We help the clients to position the right questions to get the right answers. We are helping our clients to document the processes. We also bring the adequate scenarios and suggestions. And of course, we are supporting implementation and operation and supporting GRC implementations or customizations to support this. But as I said previously, this is what we are doing for clients that ask for our support. But the framework is free for download, so you can download and implement it yourself if you have the right knowledge and the right resources to do it. The roadmap of implementation is basically the classical implementation stage and the operation stage, similar to what you would do with an ISO 27001 or with NIST, for example, in your organization. And the deliverables that we usually deliver after a successful implementation are the documentation of the goals and objectives, the scope, the inventory of the source and information, the project plans, define the roles and responsibilities, then the definition of the method of calculation for the alert readiness framework, the documentation of the sources, the definition of the alert readiness framework committee that I already explained about, perform the risk assessment for the identification of RTP and RTI controls, and of course, a performance evaluation. And on the operation, we need to search for metrics, we need to evaluate the metrics, and we need to continue to update the plan and operate the plan adequately. So these are the deliverables that are suggested that you define whenever you are implementing the framework within your organization. So as a conclusion, I believe that this is a key piece that helps organizations to unify the language of cybersecurity using a proactive readiness approach. It fully integrates within any organization, extending it to the business layer. It's adaptable and flexible, involves everyone, and it's in fact a structured response, because nowadays, more than ever, we discussed about cyber resilience, but effectively there are not that many definitions or clear tools about how you implement resilience. And this is an effective, actionable way to implement resilience and to strengthen resilience within an organization. So the framework is available for download. You can download it freely, as I said. And I would just like to finish up by two statements. One of them by Albert Einstein, saying that the significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were when we created them. And in reality, still today, I see many organizations struggling because they are using same frameworks as a decade ago, whilst the scene has significantly changed. And I understand why, because attackers are much more flexible. Large organizations are not that flexible, so it's hard and it's a challenge. And of course, that the best way to predict our future is to create it, and this one is from Peter Drucker. So this said, I would once more like to thank you very much for attending and for having me, and I'm available for any questions that might be raised from
Yeah. So Rui, I have a question, and it's related in a way to, look, these documents are amazing, right? And in security, like, you have this insane amount of knowledge that is distilled into, a document, which is still, what is it, 150 pages? Something like that,
Yeah.
right? So have you looked at, for example, now with the new ChatGPT and LLMs, etc., and this idea of actually starting to introduce almost a layer of abstraction where we use the LLM's ability to almost process the document and the framework, right? And then have that the one that becomes the interface. Do you know what I mean? In fact, I think Chris was just asking a question, how to explain this to a board. I think the key here is to customize it to the audience. Do you know what I mean? And I think the bots these days, I almost feel like I want to get into a world where every document like this has a bot, right? That is being completely trained with it, that understands it, even understands the type of questions, understands the best way to onboard, and to bring people into the framework. And then that's who you interact with. Does that make sense?
It makes loads of sense, Dinesh. Thank you for that. In fact, I have used the ChatGPT for hours with Alert Readiness Framework. I have uploaded the PDF there, and I've had hours and hours of discussion with ChatGPT. It has helped me. It has helped me to define approaches. It has helped me to think about new stuff. And right now, for example, our team is using ChatGPT to develop alert readiness framework readiness assessment. What do I mean? Sometimes we go to client and we present this, but they say, oh, this is pretty cool. But then what is the next step? You know, because for example, if I present a fantastic service, I might say, I'll give you a POC, you want to try. Here, there is nothing to try. So what we are developing is we are developing a readiness assessment so that organization, and that collates with the question about how to present this to the board. So the objective of the readiness assessment is first to understand how mature your organization is to implement something like this, because as you can understand, this is not for organizations that have a low maturity. It's not for them. If they are not organized, they will not be able to cope with this management framework. But if they have a certain level of maturity, then this assessment can help, first of all, that they can understand the gap between where they stand now and where they should stand in order to be able to implement. And second, what are the effective customized benefits for your organization? And this is something that we could take to the board, right? I don't know if there are any more questions.
I don't see any more questions in the chat. I think it would be really cool to do a panel around this. I think for the next summit, let's try to do a panel, because I think there's so much really good content here. And I think we need to almost just come up with a couple of use cases, and maybe we put a bot in the middle and we start to have those conversations with the bot, because I think that's where he adds a lot of value, right? In a way, the new ability to consume these documents, or else the impact is always quite limited.
Of course, I agree, Dinesh. And it's great to have this discussion with you, because I know that you are a really knowledgeable person as well. You are a practitioner, but most of all, you are also very active in the community, trying to contribute with the industry to make the industry evolve. And that's precisely the idea of Alert Readiness Framework. That's precisely why we made it free. We made it downloadable. It's like, and my idea is also to create an advisory board, because there are things that should be improved. Definitely, there are things that should be improved. But this was the first stone. Let's build on top of it. Let's make version 1.1. Let's make version 2.0. Let's gather more people from the community. And why not? Let's have more organizations implement it. It would be good, because there is so much to be done that as more organizations. I was in the US last week. I presented in a university, and one person approached me and said, I work for this consulting company. Can I implement it? And I said, well, you download it and you implement it. What is the issue,
No, very good. Brilliant. All right, man. Stay in the recording and